So I got Rich Ashworth here. He's one of our faculty members, and yeah, say hi, Rich. You can hear
How's it going?
him. So, Rich, today I just want to kind of chat with you about your teaching philosophy, about your travels, about your career in general, and what you got going on in your life. And
Sure.
I'd love to start with kind of your inspiration as becoming a professional dancer and following this, this path.
This path. As far as like being a professional dancer, yeah, I think that I grew up in a dance studio, and that was kind of inspired going there through watching things on the media that I had. I'm old enough where the internet wasn't really popular back in the
Or
day.
around.
Or around, yeah. Like the concept of YouTube was like alien until I was like a junior in college. So I was watching TV shows like Lawrence Welk with my grandmother. I grew up in like a country kind of, so I was watching like Lawrence Welk. We would rent old musicals from the library every now and then and bring them home. I wanted to be Gene Kelly. Like I thought he was the coolest. And so because my sister was going to dance classes and stuff like that, I was very young, and my mom signed me up, and I kept going. And then eventually that turned into us getting cable. And I saw Thriller, and I saw all these like different choreographic masterpieces and started mimicking that. And then kind of grew up to want to do that professionally, and then realized through all of it that I needed to do a lot of work to make sure I was making the living that I wanted to live. So aside from performing when I was much younger, I was also starting to kind of expand my teaching abilities, and then that became more of a passion, I think, than performing. So
yeah, it's interesting too. Like growing up watching those old tapes. You say you renting tapes and watching Gene Kelly and guys, because I did the same thing, and we didn't have as much as everyone else does these days. Like YouTube, like you use YouTube. You said you cannot. Back in the day, you could watch every single piece of tape that was out there, but now there's no chance. So we focused on specific moments in dance history, and so you know what I mean. So and there, that's great that there's much more out there now. I think that's a great thing, but I think that is the difference of those generations.
And comparatively, is like I can get as like me being my age and where I'm from, I could get as frustrated as I can about things like TikTok or like whatever. But TikTok is just like the MTV that I had growing up.
Yeah.
Like I knew that I was like at the bar, like the ballet bar in dance class growing up, like practicing popping or something that I had like seen somebody do, and I know it like messed with my dance teacher just as much. Like the social aspect of this TikTok thing, it's like, yeah, no, I want to get those. And I think it's all valid. Like I think it gets a bad rep, but it's all valid to like expanding our experiences. Right. So.
Absolutely. And all dance can be good dance if you use it for, the educational side. I'm sure there's some things out there that I think we all kind of stay away from because it's a little beyond what the scope of what we would prefer to teach. So, but you're right. As far as expanding dance, expanding the idea of like learning as students, it's an awesome tool. And you mentioned Gene Kelly. What's the moment? Do you remember the moment where you're like, whoa, that dude's awesome? Because I had that same feeling.
Okay, yeah, I had, so with Gene Kelly, it was American in Paris, I think. So a lot, and I saw American in Paris before I saw Singing in the Rain, which a lot of people like Singing in the Rain's the staple, right? So yeah, it was American in Paris, and he did the I Got Rhythm, and it looked so much fun, and what it did for me being like, because I grew up in the country, I had a cow farm growing up. So like watching this, it kind of gave me a weird experience of being like, oh, everybody in the city they're happy. And look, this guy's street performing and he's busking, and like the kids are hanging out with like, it like, which is totally a weird, like kind of atmosphere now when you think about it. But it was just like, he was so talented and he was so charismatic with the way that he was communicating, not just with his you know, like words, and he was singing, but he was also just like charismatic in the way he was moving.
Right.
There was that sense of, in the movies specifically, there was that sense of like, this is a man, but also like, this is somebody who can like be graceful and be a presence. And I don't know, it was just something that like drew me in. And, you know, like like Arthur Duncan, just watching somebody like him who was so graceful and playful when he tap danced, and was like, would like talk to the audience. Like he would break the fourth wall all the time and be like, yeah, I made that step up the other day, or like I stole this from, like, that was the kind of introduction into like the social aspect of these dance forms that I love so much too.
That's really cool, because when you can be that confident on stage where you can start talking to the audience. Now, maybe it came out of nerves. Who know? We don't know, you know, but he was definitely a master at that. And that's what I've seen, like when you teach in your classes, you want their personality to come out. So can you tell me, like, just kind of like, give me a rundown of kind of your approach and what you want, like when you walk in class, what do you want to get out of those kids, and how do you communicate that to them?
Sure. All right. So I think that specifically the things that I teach aren't just, and I think dancing in general, it's not just a skill, right? I think that as passionate artists and as passionate teachers and things like that, we realize that dancing is not just a set of skills that you learn, but it's a language that we use to like communicate our personal ideas, or the ideas of the culture and people that invented the language that we speak with our bodies. So in school, we don't just learn a bunch of words. We learn things like grammar and syntax, and then from that we can form an identity, and we can form our own voice. So like we can, if you learn how the rules of a language work, like you can make sentences and then write paragraphs correctly, and then as an artist you can choose to bend those rules and break those rules to write songs and poetry, and then you have a voice. So I think that what I would like to do with my class every time I walk in is to teach a few words that maybe people don't know. And then in the form, and those are based on the facts of like the culture and the history that they come from. And then my opinion is put onto that with those facts, like that's my choreography, that's my voice. Now, can I instill in you the fun and the joy that voice brings me? And then can I bring that out of you to maybe say things, maybe say what I said in a way that makes sense to you, or say something that's in response to what I said with my movement. Cool. So I kind of approach it that way, just to kind of like, everything that I teach is relatively conversational. Like hip hop is presentational now, but it was invented not to be.
Right.
It's invented to be like shared, and it was a conversation, even if that was confrontational. So like, I think I kind of want to try my best to put that aspect back into my class. This back and forth, because it is a back and forth, right? I'm older than a lot of the people that I teach, but I can still learn from them just as much as they can learn from me.
Well, yeah, there's always that moment where you see some kid like doing something crazy and you're like, that actually looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I got an idea.
It's like, give me 10 minutes and I could make that like marketable. Like,
yeah.
You know, it's just one of those things. It's like kids already dance, you know, even if that means they excel at something that they don't consider dancing, that they're already finding those ways of like expressing themselves through what they're most comfortable with. So I think it's my job as a teacher to expand what they're comfortable with, so they can express themselves even better, even more.
Yeah, I agree. And do you find that because they excel at this, right? However old you are, like even, you know, you see like 10-year-olds doing triple pirouettes. I mean, it's hard for them to put in their head that like, oh, I'm really at the top of my game here, or whatever the situation is, wherever they are in their dance level, they're doing it so much, it's hard for them to, it's easy for them to get frustrated, right? So what is it, what's your approach in that scenario? I mean, because that's easy to read whenever you're in class. How do you kind of extinguish that?
I tend to think that so there's kind of a couple different aspects to that. I think that the concept of competition, in any sense of the word, like you hear the term competition, like we're a competition studio mostly, or like you hear like of dance competitions. And I think that competition are a really good way to see what else is out there, not as a judgment sense, but just as a comparison to see like, oh, like, wow, that person she has a really, really nice extension and she knows how to hold it. Or like that guy can turn for days. I wonder what like his secret is. So you can learn from each other. But I think that a lot of people think that competition automatically means better than, like if you get a higher score, then you're better than. And I don't think that's necessarily true. You can only really try to be better than you were yourself yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's also the concept of accepting failure, right? Like I think that there's so much, like it's okay to be honest with the people around you and honest with yourself to say it's just not happening today. All right. But understanding how that feels and then learning from that and then trying again tomorrow and then getting it is so much more satisfying sometimes than being able to just do it right away.
Well, yeah, you have to know how to not do it in order to know how to do it, you know.
So much more learning from failure and like glory from succeeding out of failure than just achieving something right away.
I think that's right. And it's important to point out that when we do see these videos on YouTube or Instagram or wherever, it looks great. And I've told dancers before too, like, yeah, they look awesome, but guess what? They rehearsed that, and they may have shot that 20 times. They rehearsed it for the full day. So we only see that finished product, and I think a lot of times psychologically, when we see that, we're like, oh, I'll never get there. I'll never be good enough. But we don't see Gene Kelly in rehearsal messing up a step. We don't see, De Niro forgetting his lines on the screen. We have to use the class time to fail. Like that is where you're right. The best work comes in. And I think that it's important for dancers to remember that.
Yeah. That's why like improvisation and like the ability to do that, even in dance class or whatever, like I think it's really important just because it's problem solving on the spot. Like it with tap dancing, for example, like you can all of a sudden you realize you're on the wrong foot. Like, and that happens all the time. Like all of a sudden, like my weight distribution is so much different than like the person standing next to me. So every now and then I'll start shifting and realize I'm on the wrong foot, which happens. But then I have to figure out how to either get back to it or do everything on the wrong foot. Right. So like the concepts of like problem solving and getting through that maze of my own brain and my own like connectivity.
While you're dancing.
While you're dancing, that story of, if you watch the movie, it's a different story than I think what actually happened. But, that concept of like Bojangles falling down the stairs and having to dance back up and making it look like
it was on purpose. Yeah.
Oh, it was all part of the show, folks. Having that confidence to go on is just embracing that. Yeah, that's a failure, but out of that, something really, really good came. And I know that's a weird, like, weird bridging of that story, but it's still a good kind of parable, like, to what should happen after you mess up.
That's the beauty of being live on stage, right? Like, we teach the dancers and the students, like, just go with it. Whatever happens, like, don't do. The only thing you can do wrong is stand there, right? Yeah. Just keep going, because really the audience doesn't know. They weren't in the hours of rehearsal with you. Like, that's what makes performances so great and magical and fun. Like, think about it. You're doing the same performance every single time. Like, something different happens, you actually remember it. And
absolutely,
that's something
everybody always remembers. Like, yeah, that's like there's I forget who said it, but it was a stand-up comedian that's like, everybody always remembers the day that somebody famous bombed. Like and that's a story that they can tell anyway, right? So it's like either way, you're giving somebody a memory that then they can take to somebody else, and your experience enlightens people. Like, that's totally fine.
And so as far as tap dancing goes, right? Like, things I think a lot of dancers have the fear of putting on tap shoes, right? I mean, sometimes they've had bad experience, right? And I guess what would be your message? Because you teach tap with us and hip hop, but I would say like my favorite thing to watch you do is tap because just your approach to the whole deal. So I guess what's your message to those dancers who are like, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. You know, I won't wear jazz shoes, you know.
Right. I think that the specificity and like the virtuosic nature of tap dancers that are really, really good, it's intimidating in the same way that a lot of tap dancers look at a ballet dancer and say, oh, the articulation of that person's ankle or knee is such that they look like a gazelle, and like the beauty of them is like, it's almost like they're so natural at it that it's unnatural looking, like it's ethereal.
Yeah.
And I think that with tap, again, I try to approach it as much as like a language as I can. So if you can get by with learning a few words that everybody knows, like when you take, you know, French for the first time or Spanish for the first time in school, you learn how to say, hello, my name is, you know, like, you know, and you learn how to do things appropriately. And then you learn, if you like experience it more, you learn the conversational version.
Right.
So I think the way that I approach it is just start out small. Like when you're walking, you're still making sounds, right? And if you walk a certain way, if you march, that's 2 sounds, 1, 2. Or if you heel toe, that's still tap dancing, right? So I think there's a fear of getting it wrong, but just from walking, you're already doing it right. And then it's just about organizing it.
Yeah.
So I think that as far as anybody who's like afraid of it, generally speaking, I think that comes from that aspect of what you were talking about of like not getting it right away. Mm-hmm. And then because of the nature of a lot of tap classes, by the time it might be gotten, we're already moved on, right? So it's not just the speed of the dance, it's the speed of the process to achieve the dance. And so as far as my class, I try to gear it towards not the best person in the room, but the middle, like the average, the median or mean of the skill level of the class, with the understanding that the best person in the room can always make it faster. They can always articulate their sounds a little bit more. Or if they're really, really that good, they can add heel sounds to add space, right? Wow. So that's something that's actually, you know, we can have multiple levels and have everybody feel comfortable with themselves in the class. Yeah. But also for really good tap dancers, specifically younger tap dancers, the hardest thing to do is slow down. So then, yeah. So it's like all these like great tap dance classes, you see like all the kids, and teachers get frustrated all the time. They're like, you have to slow down because you're speeding up and you're doing it faster. And it's such like a youthful energy. But in the class, I think everybody can be on the same page if the people that learn fast really force themselves to slow down. And that gives time for the people that are maybe a little more nervous about it to come up. And now we have a community, right? We don't just have individual dancers in the class. We have a community based on a culture. And
so everybody learns.
Yeah. And everybody helps each other out. Like that's the whole point of, specifically with tap dancing for me, is that like I go to jam sessions every now and then. I'll go to like jams in Chicago or something like that. And if you're doing something, you're doing it right. But if you do something a certain way, somebody will be like, hey, you probably shouldn't do that again. You know, like it's this weird, like, but that person that told you not to do something again a certain way will be like, this is how I learned it from 3 more people. And one of those people is like Arthur Duncan, or like, oh yeah, I took this class with Savion one time and he did it this way. So it's like, and now it's sharing. It's not like I'm better than you. It's just a community. Yeah. And it's great.
And this kind of bleeds into another class you teach, is body percussion.
Yeah.
So that's a fun class.
It's pretty fun. It's pretty fun. It hurts. It hurts.
It hurts.
But it hurts in a good way.
Do you find that like that helps bridge the gap? I mean, 'cause I feel like body percussion is something a little foreign to everyone as far as your trained classical dancer goes.
Yeah, I think that so it's interesting. I think there's a lot of people, it's how people learn, right? I think there's a lot of people that learn dance mathematically,
Hmm.
which is how music has tend to be organized, or they learned it poetically in the form of like I feel the music the way, and that's what makes me move, right? And I think the body percussion aspect of how I approach it kind of bridges that, where it still can't, what the math people have to think about is, yes, it's organization, but it's never mechanical unless that's the aesthetic that we're looking for, right? So it's that marriage of like definitely having the math of the rhythm, but then finding the fluidity of what's behind it.
So for people that may not be familiar with body percussion in general, like what could they expect from like a body percussion class from you?
So in my class, generally, we start with just understanding that our body is, in the same way that tap dancing articulates the feet, our body can also be a drum set. And every body from the inside out, we all, if we're alive, we all have a pulse, hopefully, right? So having that pulse, we already have some sort of steady beat happening inside us, yeah? And even if we have like an arrhythmic heartbeat or like it's still happening, right? So that just makes you a little funkier. So having that pulse and then articulating like what parts of our body do make noise. Like I'm talking about right now in some of my schoolwork, ham bone, for example. So ham bone has a specific posture, and you're hitting your leg, your ham bone on your leg, and that's coming up to the chest, and that has two different tonalities. So in my class, generally, we'll start at the chest. We'll go to like the stomach, which is the chest is full of air, right? So sometimes it can have a hollow sound. The stomach is full of whatever you had that day, right? So that can have a different sound. Your legs are solid, they're more solid, so they have a different sound. And then we can stomp on top of that. And then we have air passages in our body that can, and there's a tap dancer named Max Pollock who I learned from very briefly, but he'll have like on the neck just hollow sounds or right, and then layering that with aspects of tap dancing, all of a sudden you're working on like heavy coordination, which once that sets in is really working on different layers of coordination, rhythm, and you're realizing that it's all possible.
That's awesome, dude. And you gotta listen to each other, right? Which is another great skill.
Right? So that sense of community is there. And sometimes in body percussion, we'll break up into like 3 different groups and you have to listen to everybody in the group, but you also have to listen to the group next to you, right?
Oh,
so that multitasking of like, now you're layering, now you're an orchestra.
right.
You're like one instrument in the orchestra. And so how is that going to, yeah, so it is like community building in its own right too.
Yeah, because a lot of times, like as dancers, we're listening to things that are, we press play and it plays. So we're dancing like to the music or whatever. We very rarely do we get that opportunity of live music, unless you're doing a live show or a body percussion class, like you're saying, to be a part of the music, so to speak, right? Because that's when the true harmony happens, man.
Yeah. And I think that's hopefully it's happening more and more, that we can have those conversations, right? It's like whenever in Chicago, when we perform, there's a place called the Green Mill, which is like one of Al Capone's old like stomping grounds, and it's like a jazz bar. Like they only take cash or like American Express, and like there's jazz every night, and especially before like the pandemic stuff was going on. They have live poetry slams there a lot, and they have different things, and occasionally you'll see a tap dancer just go up and have a conversation with an upright bass player, right? And that thing of language where like they definitely are speaking the language of music, and they're doing it in such a way that even though their accents are different, they're fully understanding each other.
Right.
And then so and again, kind of in the concept of body percussion, but also in tap and anything that we teach. Because I'm a teacher, I'm usually at the front of the room, and behind me is that giant mirror, right? So I sometimes that, hopefully the sound and the rhythm of things can pull us away from that and just, like you said, like experience the people next to us in a way that, like, it's always really fun to have a challenge of looking someone in the eye while you're making a rhythm and seeing, like, it's always a game for us to see who like messes up first, and that's totally fine. We laugh about it later, but also, like, that's that conversation of like, oh, we're in this together. Like, it's not being like a fun competition, but it's like, no, we're sharing this experience together. Like, I don't need to look at the mirror because I have you. Like, I can see my fear and joy in your face right now.
Right, and then you continue to practice. It becomes normal. Then you get on stage. Then you can actually connect with the audience, connect with just flat ball change past someone without looking at them. It becomes a real, conversation, like you said.
And what's interesting is, like, we talk about on stage all the time, right? Because we're training performers. But that concept of eye contact comes in business, right? That concept of, like, understanding the rhythm that's happening around you. It happens in our everyday lives, so we could be, like, socially, like, appropriate. So we're not just walking in a room and not reading the room and being like, like being the guy in the corner that's like, I'm here, like, that's fine. But that's totally fine, and like, you do you. But it's also like, it's also sharing the experiences of the people around you in the moment, which is like a life thing. That's not even like a dance thing.
And Rich, the last thing I'll ask you, and we'll let you go, is just tell us briefly about what you're studying and what you got going on. You're still traveling Flow 40, you're traveling, teaching, but what do you got going on in that side of the world?
Wherever I can and staying safe, I'm still traveling. But right now, hopefully by May, I'll be done with grad school. I'm currently at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, getting a choreography master's. And what that's entailing right now for me is tracing the lineage of tap and other American percussive dance forms, and seeing where they kind of connect and seeing how they influence each other. A lot of it's dealing with the origins based on the races that contributed to their comeuppance as far as arts, but also it's examining differences between rural and urban atmospheres, as well as North and South in like a pre-Civil War kind of America. So there's a lot of I don't know if it's necessary. I don't think it's collaboration, but there's a lot of cooperation, confrontation, and competition that kind of cultivated this artistic atmosphere that we have now. So I'm just kind of exploring that a little bit more.
Dude, that's awesome. Well, and especially coming from a guy who grew up on a farm with a bunch of cows. I mean, that's an awesome path that you're on, especially to find that history, because a lot of dancers don't know the history. And I think it is important to celebrate the past, celebrate the origins of that, because that's what we love tap dance so much. We've got to know where it came from and why.
Yeah, everything we do as dancers, I think the only thing that's really ours is if we come up with choreography or like the voice that we say things with. I can honestly say, as a dancer, I did not invent anything. So all the credit that I can give is not to myself. It's to the people that like suffered, or the people that like sweated or bled for this art form that I now take for granted. So like, I think that's the whole point of like culture and community, right? Is you learn from it, you better yourself with it, and then you give back to it.
And showing the love and respect that those who created it deserve, because they shouldn't be forgotten. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, because those guys and girls were, I mean, think about, okay, so if you can name 3 legends just of any era that maybe some young dancers could take a look at, tap maybe in particular, 3 legends they could look up on YouTube, who would it be?
On YouTube, I would say, this is a hard one.
But you can just name a bunch if you have
I'll just name some that you should look up either way.
Yeah.
So, because this is before video cameras, some of them. So I would say look up Master Juba. All right. the master Juba. His real name was William Henry Lane. He was one of the first doing recognizable tap dancing. And he has a very interesting life story. So I would look up Master Juba. I would look up a guy named John Bubbles, who is the father of rhythm tap dancing as we know it. And we're also in this whole thing, we're trying to get rid of labels as much as possible. But look up John Bubbles. Yeah, I would say just Bojangles. Look up some of the stair dancing and stuff that happened, but also, so those three I think were really pivotal in establishing certain aesthetics that different tap dancers have.
Cool.
So I would say that Mr. Bojangles, definitely John Bubbles, and William Henry Lane are the three that come to mind first, as far as like the very first tap dancers of note. Yeah,
because of course in the modern era you got your Savion Glovers, you got your Gregory Hines, you got your I always knew Tommy Toon, and like the tallest tap dancer of all time, and I love like even the Nicholas brothers. Like you still see their influence today. Sure. I don't know if you saw the new Aladdin. Did you see that?
Yeah.
When they were like, never had a friend like me, and they're jumping off the thing, and boom. They straight up ripped that from the Nick. Those guys to me were. I couldn't believe that they could still walk in their older age.
And I would recommend on YouTube, look up. There's a few YouTube videos. Look up the history of the Moonwalk.
Okay. All right.
The Moonwalk came out of tap dancing. It was originally a tap dance move that was turned into a funk move, which was turned into a hip hop move. Yeah. The history of the Moonwalk is it's all connected. That's what we're finding out too, right? Everything's all connected. Yeah. And for the ladies in the room, also look up people like Brenda Buffalino and Diane Walker. Nowadays, look up Michelle Dorrance. She's a genius. There's a lot of people that need the not need, because they're already amazing, but like that should be
recognized. Yeah. I
just mentioned like 3 men, but there's so many, women and there's just need to be a part of the conversation, just to like keep it real.
Because dude, if you're a tap dancer too, it's like it's such a fun skill to have, and like you said, just to kind of wrap things up, it doesn't matter what your level is when you walk into class, like just give it your best. It's a safe space where you're allowed to mess up, to learn, to grow. And what I love, what I'm taking away from this conversation is it's a sense of community. And regardless of our background or where we come from or our skill level, we can all celebrate that together. And I think that's a pretty awesome thing.
And I think we dance. We don't always have to like it, but we dance because we love it, right? It's like, it's part of me now that like I don't always like going to class. Sometimes I have a headache, but when I get there, it's like, oh, I love this. Yeah. And so embracing those moments of love, and all of a sudden that it's a part of you, and that's really what it is for me.
That's awesome. Well, Rich, thanks so much, man. I appreciate you taking the time to chat and spit some history at us, and we're all better off for it. Go open your books, open your computers.
Thank you. On the other end of it, it's nice to see you.
Yeah, it's nice to see you too, sir.